It is indeed Market Monday. Each and every Monday, I go over the biggest risers and fallers in average draft position in the best ball markets. I'll discuss whether I'm buying or selling these players at their new prices and why. The idea is to get you up to speed very quickly on what's actually happening out there in drafts and how to adjust. Let's begin with the three best ball risers from the last 7 days. Want to start with Jameson Williams. JMO is up 3 spots to 48 overall on Underdog. I believe this rise stems from a press conference new Lions offensive coordinator John Morton did last week. Actually, before we get to Jameson Williams specifically, one thing Morton said when asked about his scheme was, he was like, look, I'm not going to change much of what Ben Johnson was doing. Why would I? And so, yeah, that was always my assumption, but it's still good to hear that the 55-year-old Morton isn't some hardo egomaniac who wants to, quote unquote, put his stamp on an offense, a Lions offense, which ranked second in yards per play last season and third in yards per play in 2023. But anyway, here's what Morton said about Jameson Williams, who, by the way, is still just 24 years old. Jameson entering the final year of his rookie deal, although the Lions do have a team option on him for 2026. But anyways, Morton said, Jameson has been unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'm so excited to see him this year. It's going to be a breakout year for him. So I can't wait. I just can't wait, man. Now, those comments on JMO are in stark contrast to what Morton said when he was asked about round 3 rookie, Isaac Tesla. Here's what he said about Tesla. As a rookie, it's tough, man. It's a lot coming from the college game into the NFL, but I can sense that he'll be okay. We have to be smart with rookies, especially wideouts, because everything is new. They're running routes they've never ran before. They're listening for the technique, and they got to read a defense. That's a lot going on. Shout out to Coach Speak Index for those quotes. So, normally this like Coach Speak stuff in May, a coach says he's excited for his player. I don't really pay it any mind. But when he's willing to say something more cautious or more critical of another player, especially in the same position group, I thought that meant something on Jameson, and the market reacted, again, up 3 spots. Remember, 2024 was Jameson Williams' first full NFL season. He has had such a rocky start, so many injuries, suspension, other issues. 2024, he only has a 64% catch rate, which, wasn't great considering his average depth of target was 36th among all wideouts. But my point is that you need to leave room, or I think we need to leave room for Jameson to get even better, further removed from the knee injury. Finally, a full NFL season under his belt. Entering his prime at age 24, coaches are raving about him, theoretical contract year. So I want to be in on Jameson Williams. The problem is just price. He is now going ahead of Zay Flowers, who I'll get to. He's going 8 spots ahead of George Pickens. Jameson's going 9 spots ahead of Jalen Waddle, 15 spots ahead of Chris Olave, 19 spots ahead of Jerry Jeudy. On projection, it's going to be really tough to get there on Jameson. We've checked his inputs, and we are still pretty decently behind in terms of projection inputs to ranking for Jameson, but I still want pieces of him for stackability with Jared Goff and also for these huge outlier explosions that Jameson can have, 80-yard touchdowns, multiple of them in a game. It's the kind of player that I'm willing to reach above rank 4. Second riser is Will Shipley, up 7 spots in the last 7 days, actually up 12 spots in the last 2 weeks to 189 overall is Will Shipley. We know how much the Eagles trusted Kenny Gainwell. Used him in a lot of 2-minute drill situations, some clear passing downs. Before Saquon Barkley got there, plenty of huge snaps for Kenny Gainwell and things like the Super Bowl. So I thought it was at least notable that the Eagles let Kenny Gainwell walk to the Steelers on a 1-year, $1.8 million contract in free agency. If Howie Roseman really wanted to bring back Gainwell, he could have pretty easily at that near minimum price. So enter Will Shipley, 2024 round 4 pick, didn't really play as a rookie outside of stone cold garbage time and week 18. But I think the reason they are letting Gainwell go is because just they understand Will Shipley gives them more juice, more explosive plays in his bag. And then the Eagles also got A.J. Dillon 1 year, $1.3 million as a big back option if he can make the team. Now, look, it's really hard to see Will Shipley having standalone value as long as Saquon is healthy. We're going to hear stuff all summer about the Eagles wanting to take some work off of Barkley, get him more rest, etc. When the chips are down in games, I don't think that's how it's going to go. I think they're going to continue to absolutely load up Saquon Barkley with touches. But what I will say is Saquon touched the ball 482 times last season, including the playoffs. He's 28 years old now. He's had an ACL tear. He's had ankle sprains. I don't think that Will Shipley would be a full workhorse if Saquon went down, but 12 to 16 touches per game in the NFL's most dominant run scheme / offensive line situation, I think Shipley is a fine zero running back candidate at 189 overall, can still get him around 200 overall on DraftKings. Third riser to hit is Tyler Shough, up another 11 and a half spots on DraftKings. Shough now going 188 overall there on DK. Even before Derek Carr's shoulder forced him into retirement, I actually expected Tyler Shough to start a ton of games this year, one way or another. Saints seemed ready to run Carr out of town. I know the fans were ready to run Derek Carr out of town. Injuries were an issue. Shoulder was an issue. It was just over in New Orleans for Derek Carr. And I think the Saints / new coach Kellen Moore knew that before the draft. And they did target Tyler Shough as a priority at 40th overall. So now he enters what the Saints are calling a camp battle versus Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener. I expect Shough to win it. And maybe the over-under on his game started, independent of injuries, is like 13 and a half or something. But all 17 games started for Tyler Shough is definitely in play if he can stay healthy. Now, the bigger question is, can he score enough fantasy points to matter? Well, you don't often get a quarterback who has a path to 17 starts, who has Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Alvin Kamara, Brandon Cooks, TD Vulture, Taysom Hill is hurt / likely gone. Shough plays in a dome. He has a favorable schedule. You don't often get those guys at 188 overall on DraftKings. The problem is really just, listen, he could be terrible. He was in college, Shough was, for like 7 years and was never overly impressive. But Dane Brugler had Shough as his quarterback 4 in this class. He ran a 4.63 at 6'5", 219. He could be a better athlete than people give him credit for. Much like the Bo Nix stuff, I'd rather trust the NFL evaluation of a quarterback than the tape bros on Twitter. So specifically on DraftKings is where I prefer to take these kind of quarterbacks. It's a 20-round draft there. I aim to get 3 quarterbacks stacked with at least 1 pass catcher on all my teams. You get the 300-yard bonus, which helps the pocket passers. Rushing TDs are worth a little less, relatively at least, due to the full PPR format. And also on Shough, I consider Olave, Shaheed, who I talked about last week, and even Juwan Johnson a bit undervalued right now in drafts. So yeah, if and when Tyler Shough is named the starter for the Saints, his ADP is going to spike. So I like getting shares now of him as my quarterback 3 on DraftKings in setups where I take Olave, Shaheed, or need a backdoor with Juwan Johnson. Let's get to this week's fallers. David Njoku down 6 spots to 120 overall on DraftKings. Raw athleticism at tight end is just something I want to bet on. Seems like every year David Njoku fits the bill as a mid-round tight end that can hit ceiling outcomes in a 1-week sample. But he's never topped 882 yards in a season in his 8-year NFL career. So that's how you end up with a guy, and also the Browns quarterback situation is how you end up with this guy with an ADP of 120 overall on DraftKings. But man, how many tight ends can just go off in terms of target share? Njoku had 3 games with 13 plus targets last season. He had 3 more with 11 plus targets in 2023. The Browns can go into these modes where they just feed him quick hitters and screens as a primary target. Not that many tight ends can say that. So yeah, we're pretty far ahead of ADP on Njoku in our best ball rankings, especially as he's slipped recently. I think people might be docking him for the Harold Fannin pick, which I get on one hand. I like Harold Fannin, but we've seen this so many times before. Pass catching tight ends as a rookie is just a tough role to immediately steal from a starter like Njoku. So at 129 on Underdog and 120 on DraftKings, I'm in on Njoku there. And yes, I still like the 3 tight end teams on Underdog that wait a bit. In other words, teams that take 3 of the Jonnu, Andrews, Evan Ingram, Loveland, Tyler Warren, Njoku, Ferguson, Goddard tier, you know? I think that's an interesting way to play the tight end room this year. We're actually working on a pod. I'll be out sometime in the next couple of weeks about different strategies for this year's best ball streets. Going to do a show about with Herzig and Leone about that, so stay tuned for that. Second faller is Trevor Lawrence, down 4 spots to 137 overall on DraftKings. I'm a little surprised Trevor Lawrence is moving down considering the Jaguars added Travis Hunter. They added Bishul Tootin in the draft. And everyone's excited about new offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. I don't think the injury on T-Law should be a concern. He had surgery to repair that AC joint that ended his season last year, but that was on his left or non-throwing shoulder. I think the real issue with Lawrence is he's never been a big fantasy producer in terms of touchdowns, and that's where a lot of fantasy scoring comes from at the quarterback position. You know, T-Law has never thrown for more than 25 touchdowns in a season. But I wouldn't want to bet on that being sticky. Like, if the offense is better, if Brian Thomas Jr. is actually a freak, you know, I think he is. If Travis Hunter is actually a freak as a wideout, which we'll see, I'm not sold there yet. And if Liam Cohen does the job everyone thinks he will, then Trevor Lawrence's touchdown rate can easily spike. I prefer him on DraftKings as well. All the pocket passers look better there. Ideally, I'd have him with one or both of the stud wide receivers, but you can also find backdoor stacks with Trevor Lawrence, Brenton Strange, Parker Washington, De'Ami Brown, all available very late. So I like where we have T-Law ranked right now. You know, it's just slightly behind CJ Stroud, Drake May, but ahead of that Tua, Michael Penix, Cam Ward tier. All right, third and final faller is Zay Flowers, down 2.2 spots on Underdog to 49.6 overall. 2.2 spots doesn't sound like a big move, but the higher up in ADP we go, the more it matters. And it matters more when stacking a quarterback who's drafted nearby. Lamar Jackson, ADP currently 36.5, Zay Flowers 49.6, which is awkward. The only way to be sure you get Lamar Flowers stacks on Underdog right now is to take Lamar end of round 3, early round 4, and then immediately, end of round 3, and then immediately in round 4, reach for Zay Flowers 7 or 8 spots, at least ahead of ADP. And I don't typically like doing that, you know, this high in the draft, reaching 7 or 8 spots of ADP. I don't like doing that. Data has shown that it's bad. But in large field stuff like BBM, I do think there's some merit to it. Not only will fewer people have this stack, and uniqueness is important in the best ball playoffs, but given the payout structure we have in Best Ball Mania, we need to be optimizing for the finals and a really high finish in those finals. It's not like a smaller tournament in terms of entries where I don't need to be perfect and floor matters more. And on top of all that, Flowers is the archetype of guy I like for best ball. He can have some volume concerns when the Ravens get a lead, and there's real worry this year that I think their defense will be better. But when Flowers hits, he hits in a big way because he's so insane after the catch. And he's also entering his prime, you know, third NFL season, will turn 25 in September. So I do want to mix in some of those reaches on Flowers to stack with Lamar in that 3-4 turn area. All right. Thanks to everyone for listening. This show will go up weekly from now until September. So if you have not subscribed to the EstablishTheRun.com podcast on audio or YouTube, be sure you are by searching for it anywhere podcasts or the YouTubes are found. Also, be sure you're following me on Twitter for a ton more player takes at Adam Levitan. We'll be back later this week with Silva to discuss his first top 150 rankings of the season. Those are going up Tuesday night for anyone with DraftKit Pro. Check out Silva's first top 150 of the season. For producer Ryan, for the data side team helping me to track these ADP moves, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.